Today we're talking about how decisions really get made on projects and why PMs sometimes get or feel stuck. If as you watch this video or any of the other videos, you have a comment, you have a aha moment, you have a different experience or something that will help our community or people that listen to these videos, please go ahead and put it in the comments section below. I read all the comments and I reply to all the comments. All right, that's done. Now let's get into today's video. So in this video, I'm going to talk about 5 main things you must know about decision making on projects. And I touched on the first one slightly in our last video. It's about being clear on who the decision maker is, who is ultimately accountable for your decision. It could be the sponsor, usually is. It could be the MD. You have to be really, really clear on who the ultimate decision maker is on your project. Next, you also want to be clear on how decisions are made. Usually, for key decisions to be made, it goes to a project board meeting. And even in the project board meeting, there's usually the board has to form a quorum. There has to be 3 key people there to agree to a specific decision before it's made. And usually that is outlined in your terms of reference. And for the purposes of this example, usually it ends up being the program manager sometimes, program manager, the sponsor, the senior user representative, and sometimes you might need to add somebody from senior technical representative, depending on what's going on, right? The senior subject matter expert. Those 4 need to agree, or 3, depending on what the project is, before the decision is made. Again, that is set out in the terms of reference from the beginning of the project. If you do not have a terms of reference, when you got into the project, create one so that you are clear on that from the get-go. Number 2, the project manager doesn't actually make the decision, but you're responsible for the mechanism of making sure that that decision is made. What do I mean? It's you as a project manager, you need to get the right stakeholders together to make that decision. That's why you really need to understand what your project is about. You need to know what the implications of the problem may be and who the right people are who can help solve the problem. As a PM, you need to make sure that the right people in the room, options are being considered, and the options that are being considered against the right parameters. Usually those parameters include the cost of the project, the time impact on the project, the impact to the quality of the deliverable, and the impact to the scope of the deliverable, right? And it also may include the impact to the user as well, right? So you want to make sure that all the right parameters are considered in that decision-making process, and you're carrying the right people along. And you come up with the options, and then people can make an informed and objective decision. When that informed and objective decision has been made, then it's a decision that the final accountable officer will be happy to stand by. So that's how you work with decisions. Next point. Sometimes you cannot keep waiting to have all the information to make any decision. Sometimes there will be some decisions that need to be made with the amount of the knowledge you have, right? The decision maker needs to feel supported. So give them as much information to make that decision. What does that information need to consist of? What you do know already, what you don't know that might be a risk, what the potential impact of that risk could be, and when it could hit us. And at what point you're going to come back if they make the decision that you have recommended. At what point are we going to come back and revisit the decision in the event that we need to? Because if we keep on waiting for perfect circumstances for every single decision that needs to be made, the project will not move. Right? So there's sometimes what we call known unknowns, known knowns. I'm not going to get into all of that, but The point is, you give as much information as you can, be clear on the risks and what you don't know, and any assumptions that you have made, right? And you keep on monitoring. So if anything changes, you can react as quickly as possible to that change. Let's go on to number 4. It's something that people sometimes forget. As a project manager, you cannot remove risk completely, right? There's always going to be an element of risk. So don't think you're going to ever have a project that there's no risk. What your role is to make sure that when there's a risk, you make sure that that risk is surfaced quickly. People know about the risk quickly, right? People also know about how that risk is being managed. Who owns the risk? Who is what the mitigating actions we're taking against that risk are? And what is our contingency plan? If that risk does happen, how are we planning to take care of it? What is our fallback position? Okay. Then you agree how decisions will be reviewed. That will reduce the risk. It won't take it completely away. In fact, some projects will have a set regimen where you're watching your risk every 4 weeks because you want to ensure that nothing hits you by surprise. So the decision has been made as objectively as it could have been made, right? Based on the information you had, based on some assumptions, and you are clear on what the risks are. It's done. You're moving forward. You as a project manager now needs to make sure that that risk is clearly logged. You will have a decision log for that. I like to also make sure that that decision, you give some context as to how you got to that decision, right? So that people remember how you got the decision. Be clear on what the decision actually was. And if it's a decision that we may need to revisit later on, also be clear on when we're going to revisit that decision if it is required. And who owns the decision? Who is accountable and who agreed, who signed off on that decision? Those things need to be very clear in your log. There's a decision log for that purpose as well. So those are the 5 key things that you want to make sure are in place when you're making decisions. You see here that I've talked about the doing, but I've also talked about the mindset that you need to have as you do this work. We've talked about a lot. We now need to bring everything together. We know our stakeholders, we know how to make decisions, we know how to get experience, we know how to make sure we're visible, whether it is a high profile project or not. We know how decisions are made, we know how to work under pressure. We now need to bring everything together. And that's what happens when you're finishing up, when you are completing it, right, the project. And we're going to talk about that in the next video. If you're interested in being part of our community where we move from theory to the practical, we talk about the project thinking mindset you need to have. We're moving from just ticking boxes as project managers to thinking about the choices we're making, why we're doing what we're doing, having the human element part of project management. Because if it's just to tick boxes, if it's just to make a plan, AI is very quickly doing some of these things for you. But the things I'm talking about here, AI will not do it as efficiently as you will. So if you want to be part of that kind of community, the link to your first project is in the description below, and we look forward to having you there. Right. So the next video is coming up shortly. It's somewhere in the description here on the screen, somewhere here. Go ahead and click it, and I'll see you in the next video.